So I'm Pete Daly, CEO and publisher of the Naval Institute. For those who don't know, the Naval Institute was founded in 1873 and is the independent forum for those who dare to read, think, speak, and write to advance the understanding of sea power and other issues of critical importance to global security. We're very excited to be here in San Francisco tonight with General Pete Pace as our featured speaker, and we welcome all of you. A few folks maybe deserve a special welcome. First and foremost, we welcome all the members of the Naval Institute and supporters who are here tonight. Several are here. We welcome the members of the Marines Memorial Association and Club. Special shout out to Lieutenant General Jan Hewley, President and CEO of the Marines Memorial Association and Foundation, for his help to us. Jan, thank you. We've got a lot of folks here from the Navy League, the Area Navy League, from the Naval Order, from the Coast Guard Sector, San Francisco. We've got midshipmen here from NROTC unit at Berkeley, and we've also got a contingent from Cal Maritime, and my good friend and CAG, Tom Cropper, is the president of Cal Maritime, and we're very pleased that he's here tonight, and with his faculty and cadets. So I'd like to pause here, and now that everybody sat down and got quiet, I'd like to ask you to stand, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So as I said, the Naval Institute is really excited to be out here on the West Coast tonight. It's part of our strategic plan to get out more and to come to places that we haven't been in a while. And so this is terrific. We're honored to host this event in memory of William S. Hasler. And Bill Hasler was he did a career in the Merchant Marine, mostly as an engineer. We have a few MEBA folks here tonight as well. And he was a voracious reader and a lover of history. And he had a vast collection of Naval Institute Press books and Proceedings magazines. I mean, like floor-to-ceiling collection of books. And when he passed away a couple years ago, he made a very generous gift to the Naval Institute, and we thought it was the appropriate thing to dedicate this event here in his hometown. He lived in San Francisco, and we thank Bill Hasler. So tonight, General Pace will allow time for questions, and we've got mics here and here on each side of these two rows, these two aisles. And all we ask is that when it's the time, queue up at the mic, ask your question. Please tell us who you are, and that would be great. Then everybody gets to hear, and it works much better that way. So it's now my honor to introduce our featured speaker, General Pete Pace. General Pace served as the 16th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 2005 to 2007. Prior to that, he served as the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And as such, he had the distinction of being the first Marine Corps officer, to serve in either one of those positions. He's a distinguished graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, and he's held command at virtually every level that can be had, from rifle platoon leader in Vietnam all the way up. He served in Europe, he served in Japan, Thailand, South Korea, Somalia. General Pace retired from active duty after over 40 years of active duty service in the Marine Corps. And in 2000, he did that in 2007. In 2008, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award the President can provide. He's currently serving on the board of directors of several companies, but maybe more important, he's been very involved in many nonprofit pursuits, providing leadership and support. And most of these pursuits focus on the military, military families, veterans, and wounded warriors. We in the Naval Institute are very proud that he's the chair of the U.S. Naval Institute's Foundation. Let's give a very warm welcome to General Pace.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. With a reception like that, I should just sit back down and not ruin it. Thank you very, very much. Admiral Daly, Pete, thanks very much for not only the introduction, but for your sustained leadership of the Naval Institute. It's been incredible. Thank you. And thank you all in this room. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that obviously, if you're in this room tonight, you're either for active duty right now, or you have served in the past, or you've been a great supporter of your military. So thank you to each of you for what you've done for this country. I've been asked to talk to you about a couple of things. One, just a couple minutes on the day in the life of your chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the relationship with the President and the Secretaries of Defense and the like. Two, to kind of talk about some of the lessons I learned in leadership along the way. And there are lessons in leadership because mostly I learned them by making mistakes. And lastly, to leave a little bit of time for questions that you want to have answered. Nothing's out of bounds. If I know the answer, I'll tell you. If I don't know the answer, I'll make something up. By the time you're sure I made it up, I'll be gone. So day, for me anyway, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, we start about 4:30. I get up and do a little bit of PT, maybe a treadmill or a stationary bike, push-ups, sit-ups, get showered up and things, and then get in the car about 6:15 and drive down in a small convoy down to the Pentagon. In the back of the car would be some intel for me to read that had been printed out. Get to the office about 6:30, and waiting for me would be my CIA briefer. And he or she would then spend the next 15 or 20 minutes briefing me up on the things that were too classified to put on a piece of paper to leave in the back of the car for me to read on the way in. Which meant by about 7 a.m. every day, I was pretty well depressed. At about 7, we'd have a principal staff meeting, lasts about a half hour. The personnel, intel folks, the operations guys, the logisticians, et cetera, the 3 stars who would try to get me smart real quick on what had happened over the last 24 hours, because there's always somebody someplace on the planet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week doing something stupid. And I needed to know what it was and whether or not the U.S. military might have something to do about it, because if it was a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, at 7:30 I was getting in another convoy, leaving the Pentagon with the Secretary of Defense, going over to the White House for a National Security Council meeting. And the NSC meetings would last an hour, hour and a half. Because it was wartime the whole time I was there, we would always start out with the field commanders on the video teleconference briefing the President on what was going on in their areas of operation. I was the principal military advisor to the President, but I thought it was pretty dumb baseball to be the only advisor to the President, especially when the guys in the field knew what they were doing, and I was still enjoying coffee in well-lit rooms in Washington, D.C. So we had the field commanders on with the President for maybe the first 15 or 20 minutes. When he was done asking them questions, they would drop off and we'd get on about the rest of the NSC meeting. As I said, that would last an hour, hour and a half, and then if it was a Monday or Friday, we'd go right back to the Pentagon. If it was a Wednesday, we would go up to the Oval Office to what was called a one-on-one. And the one-on-one was the President asking his chairman questions he did not want to ask in front of so many other people, and a chance for the chairman to tell the President things that he didn't want to tell him in front of a lot of other people. It was called one-on-one, but the other people in the room were the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the head of Intel, Chief of Staff of the White House. So it wasn't exactly one-on-one, but it was a one-on-one dialogue. And my president, of course, was President Bush, and he's a very smart man. And he would start asking questions. I'm a kid from New Jersey, and I start going faster and faster and faster. And the faster he would ask a question and the faster I would answer it, he'd come up with another one. It wasn't a game. I mean, this man had responsibilities. I had answers that he wanted, and I had to tell myself, Peter, slow down, number one. And number two, do not tell the President of the United States something you do not know. Now, that may sound funny, but think about it. When you're an advisor to anybody for any reason, and they ask you a question, you want to have the answer. Same for me as chairman. I've got the president asking his military advisor about his military. The very first time I did this was in October of 2001, when I was the vice chairman, but Dick Myers was on travel, so I was the acting chairman. I've been in the job all of like 3 days. And I'm in the Oval Office with the president, and we get to about the third question, and he asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to. And I simply said, Mr. President, I don't have a clue, but I'll find out. And you could see his body just kind of relax, because he knew, and he's told me so since many times, that I was not going to fill him full of stuff. It was really important to me to make sure that my president understood what I was telling him was fact, what was extrapolation from my experience, what I was guessing at, whatever the proper definition of my information was. The other thing was, I went to the White House as a captain, as a colonel, as a 3-star, as a 4-star. I got very comfortable going to the White House. Not so much going into the Oval Office, and I mean this in a very healthy, good way. The Oval Office was just super special. And President Bush made it that way because he would not go into the Oval Office if he wasn't wearing a coat and tie. It was his respect for that office. So you're in there, and you're sitting with the President of the United States, and he's asking you questions, and while you're looking him in the eye, trying to answer the questions, there's a voice right here that says, "What are you doing here?" Run away, run away. I can't run away. It was, I don't know how to describe it other than I didn't think, truthfully, I didn't think there was anybody else who should have the job I had, but I also didn't feel adequate to the job, if that makes sense. It was just such a humbling experience to be there. Whenever we got done with the president, we, being the secretary and I, would get back in the vehicles and go back to the Pentagon. And then, whether it was Secretary Gates or Secretary Rumsfeld, it was the same. Every meeting, from that point on during the day, they wanted to have 4 people in the room for sure. The Secretary of Defense, the Deputy Secretary, the Chairman and the Vice Chairman, the 4 top guys in the Pentagon. Why? Because we went from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting from about 10:30 or 11 o'clock till about 6 p.m. And there was no time to back brief, and if you missed it, you missed it. And we were going to be going out to television or audiences or other venues, and we had to be on the same sheet of music. So we sat through personnel discussions and intel discussions and operational discussions and logistics discussions and acquisitions of aircraft and tanks and you name it. Meeting after meeting after meeting. So by about 6 p.m. was when I first would get a chance to go back to my own office. And I would work the highly classified stuff that was in my inbox, and the stuff that was not so classified, I would throw in a book bag, go home around 7 o'clock, have dinner with my wife, and after dinner, work the book bag, go to bed about 10 o'clock, get up the next morning at 4:30 and do it all again. 6 years. Sounds onerous. It was an honor. It was an incredible honor to do it. And I never felt the pressure. I was never aware of the pressure until literally the day after I retired. So you all have been in rooms where the air conditioning's on and you don't recognize the air conditioning's on until it turns off, and then all of a sudden your body kind of relaxes a little bit. So the day after I retired, I wake up and all of a sudden, not my responsibility anymore. And that was an amazing feeling. Sad in one way, happy in another way. I knew I was retired after about a week when I started reading things in the Washington Post that I didn't already know. But that's kind of the litmus test in D.C. is, hey, you know, is it on the front page of the Washington Post yet? If it's not, you may be still okay. Yeah. So if you want to know more about that kind of interaction, I will simply say this as a wrap-up about day in the life of the chairman. I had many hours every day with the secretary. I had multiple hours many times a week with our president. So if I did not speak, if I did not educate them on the things I thought they needed to be educated on, if I didn't stand up and be seen and spoken and heard, shame on me. Because the system makes sure that your senior military and your elected and confirmed President and Secretary of Defense have lots and lots of opportunities to have a dialogue about what's going on. Okay. Leadership. As I mentioned, I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, mostly by making mistakes. But I do believe that leadership principles are universal, but I think leadership application is very much individual. Example, I like to shake people's hands. I tried to make sure I had a chance to shake everybody here especially, so I'm talking to family instead of talking to strangers. When somebody puts their arm around me and says, hey, Pete, you did a good job, I feel good about that. I like to do that to other people. But if you ever have had somebody who's not comfortable putting their arm around you, put their arm around you, it's like two magnets repelling. And the person trying to do it actually does more damage than good. So what I say to young folks especially is, by all means, emulate leaders who you admire. But understand that it may or may not work for you. If it does, do it. If it doesn't, leave it on the cutting room floor. Because all good leaders do not have to do every single good leadership trait, just the ones with which they are most comfortable for themselves as leaders. Okay? So we have a wide variety of folks in this room. Most are younger than me, some are older than me, but we have a spread. So what I think I might do from a standpoint of the leadership things I want to talk about is talk to the junior folks in the room and then kind of turn back on ourselves as senior folks in the room about how that might apply to us. So for the junior folks in the room, you need to pick where you're going to work. I mean, how would you not do that today? You have Wikipedia, you've got Google, you can find out a lot about the company you're thinking about or the service you're thinking about going to work for. Why wouldn't you do your homework? Look at the people, look at the product line. Would you be proud to be part of that, whatever they are producing, whether it's for the nation or it's for some company someplace? Would you be proud of that product line? Do you want to grow up and be like the leaders in that organization? Listen, if you're the CEO and you parachute in on top of a company, you might be able to change the culture of the company over time. But if you're a junior executive, a junior officer in the military, for example, the organization is going to change you. So if you like what you see in the senior leadership and you want to be like them, by all means join. But if you don't like it, just understand that if you go, you can end up looking more and more like the people you don't like. So pick where you're going to grow, where you're going to work. For the senior folks in the room then, have you Googled yourself recently? Have you looked at your company? Would you join your company if you read about that? If you were joining today, based on what's out there about you and your company, would you join your company? If the answer is yes, great, hang in there, keep going. But if it's maybe not so much, then you got some work to do to get yourself to where you ought to be. Next, I would say to the junior folks in the room, grow where you are planted. once you've picked where you want to work and you go to work there, understand that the organization sometimes needs you to do things that you don't want to do yourself. We all say to ourselves, right here, this is the job I want. And the organization says, we need you to fill this job over here. Individuals who will, one, make sure their boss knows what they'd like to do, and then get on about doing what they're told to do, are worth their weight in gold. I can give you an example, literally, every rank along the way, I was disappointed about something in an assignment or whatever. I'll just give you one example of why this particular thing about growing where you're planted is so important to me. I was a 1-star. I could tell you stories up through way before that, but I was a 1-star in this particular case. I was in Somalia as a deputy commander, U.S. forces in Somalia. I get a call from the Commandant of the Marine Corps who says, Pete, I got some great news for you. You're on the 2-star list, and I'm going to give you 1st Marine Division, Camp Pelham, California, when you come home from Somalia. 16,000 Marines. I mean, give me a break, huh? I'm a happy camper. Time goes on. 3 weeks later, I'm still in Somalia, but I'm happy, and the phone rings again, and it's the Commandant again. And he says, Pete, I know I told you that I was going to give you 1st Marine Division, but I want to be able to nominate you for your 3rd star. And I can't do that until you have joint credit as a general officer, which you don't have yet. So I'm not going to give you the division. I'm going to send you to Japan. You're going to work as a deputy commander, U.S. Forces Japan. You're going to work for an Air Force 3-star, and you'll get the credit you need so I can nominate you. Now look, things aren't going too bad. I've been a 2-star I've been a 1-star for 2 years. I'm on the 2-star list. He's talking about 3 stars, so things aren't going terrible, right? But he's taken my division. So I say, sir, if you're asking me, would I rather command 16,000 Marines and retire as a 2-star, or go to Japan, work for some Air Force 3-star as a deputy commander and maybe get a 3rd star? I'd rather have the division. He said, I'm not asking you. So I laughed like you did, but being a kid from New Jersey, I'm making a deal, right? So I said, sir, okay, I got it. I said, if I don't get the 3rd star, will you consider giving me the division on the way home? He says, yeah, but that ain't gonna happen. So I go off to Japan. I work for this Air Force 3-star. We get along really well. His strengths and weaknesses and mine are really, really good together. We work together for 2 years. He keeps his 3 stars and he goes back to work in the Pentagon. I get 3 stars, I go back to work in the Pentagon. Now we're working together as friends. He gets 4 stars, goes right out to Air Force Command. I keep my 3, I go to Marine Corps Command. I get 4, go to Joint Command in Miami. He's now Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His name is General Dick Myers. And in 2001, the President and the Secretary say to Dick Myers, you are going to be the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Who do you want to be your Vice Chairman? And he says, Pete Pace. Admiral Daly was kind enough to say I was the first guy to become Vice Chairman or Chairman because I went and did something I didn't want to do. And I ended up working for a guy who I had enormous respect for, who had the same thing for me, and when he got the responsibility to be the chairman, and he could have picked anybody in the universe he wanted, he picks me. Now, truth in advertising, all that as history. If you put me in the same place and you gave me the same option, I'd still want the division. That's what Marines are, because that's who you are. So for the young folks in the room, I'm simply saying, make sure people know what you want, but for God's sake, go do what they need you to do. Because there are more good jobs than there are good people. And then for the more senior folks in the room, have you told your subordinates why they're going to do the job they're going to do? Have you acknowledged to them that, hey, I know you want to do this, but I need you to do this. And here's why I need you to do this. And oh, by the way, you're never, ever going to get a chance to do the thing you want to do in this company. Or a couple of years from now, I'll be able to take another look at this and we'll see then. But have you made it clear to the folks that you understand what they want, you understand that you're asking them to do something that they'd rather not do, you need them to do it, and oh, by the way, here's the prospects going forward. That's the best you can do, I think, as a leader, when you need to put somebody who feels like they're a round peg and you need them in a square hole. Okay? Next, I tell the young folks, especially junior officers, make decisions. That's why you're in the job you're in as a junior executive, as a junior officer. Make decisions. I learned a lot of things in Vietnam, one of which was a bias for action. Went to Vietnam, went to Hue City during Tet Offensive 68, survived that. About a month into my tour, we were at the place in that battle where my company was ordered to go take a route around, a circle around the city to see if there were any NVA units still left. My company commander, 24 years old at the time, captain, tells his lieutenant, 22 years old at the time, second lieutenant, lead the company on this patrol. So we got 150 Marines kind of strung out because we were going through rubble and high grass and the like. As we're going through the patrol, we got to a decision point, and I called back to my company commander, and I said, here, basically, do you want me to go left or go right? And he said, go left. About a half hour or so later, I had another decision point. I called back for guidance, and he gave it to me. About an hour or so after that, I called him a third time for guidance, and this time, if you take out the curse words, he didn't say anything to me. But I got the message, which was, for God's sake, Lieutenant, make a decision. That's why you're there. I'm trying to run this company. I got mad. First I got mad at him, then I got mad at myself. And I gave the radio back to Corporal Irwin, my radio operator. I said, if he calls, tell him I'm not here. Because I was determined that if I was going to get my butt chewed again, which I did, it was going to be for making decisions, for going too far, not being egged forward. Make decisions. But if you're a youngster, first of all, you need to know where's your decision space. And if you know it's your decision to make it. If you're not sure if it's your decision to make, let me just say, if you know it's yours, make it. And if you know it's your boss's, get it to your boss as soon as you can, because you're stealing leadership time from them. But sometimes you find yourself in the middle, not knowing, is it my decision or my boss's? In that case, here's what I recommend you do. Decide what you would do if it's your responsibility. And then go to your boss and say, hey, boss, I'm not sure if this is your decision or mine. If it's mine, this is what I'm going to do. If it's yours, this is what I recommend you do. If you're working for me, I love you. You haven't come to me like a little bird waiting for me to put a worm in your mouth. You've come to me with a problem and a potential solution. And I can say, hey, you got it, go do it. Or I can say, I got it, I'm going to do that. Or I got it, and I'm going to extrapolate off what you gave me. I'm going to do it this way because of these things. Okay? But the decision process, whose responsibility is it? And make the darn decision. Now, for the senior folks in the room, have we encouraged our subordinates to make decisions? Have we made sure that they know where their left and right limits are as far as where they're supposed to be making decisions? Inside of these boundaries, these are your decisions to make. These are mine, these are yours. Have we explained that to our subordinates? And most importantly, when our subordinates kick one in the street, which they're going to do, how do we react to that? I got my master's degree in 1971, 1972. I remember very, very little about my master's degree other than writing checks. In fact, there was one point where I said, how about if I just write the checks and you send the diploma and we cut out the middleman, okay? Because this is getting painful. But I remember one class, it was a leadership class, and there was a leader of a major corporation, and a major level person in his organization made a mistake that cost that company $10 million. Now, I'm learning about this in early 70s. This is the 1960s, $10 million. So add a zero today, okay? But 1960s, $10 million. And everybody between the middle manager and the CEO said, fire this guy, fire this guy, fire this guy. And I remember the response that I read on a piece of paper from the CEO, which was, why would I fire somebody I just spent $10 million to educate? And I go, if your subordinates are working hard, if the mistakes you're making are honest mistakes and they're just lack of experience, guess what? They get experience by making mistakes. If they're honest about it and they're working hard, do we cultivate them that way? If they're making mistakes because they're lazy, but if they're working hard, why wouldn't we cultivate them? Encouraging them to make decisions and then forgiving them, so to speak, when the occasional one goes off the rails. Next. It won't surprise you that I admire courage. And yes, I absolutely admire the kind of courage that gets people medals for valor on the battlefield. Absolutely. But that's not the kind of courage I'm talking about. The kind of courage I'm talking about is when somebody's in a room, in a meeting, could be 10 people, could be 6 people, whatever, it makes no difference. And the boss is speaking, and everybody's heads are going up and down like this, and all of a sudden somebody has the temerity to say, I see it differently, and here's why. That person is worth their weight in gold. Look, as a general officer, if I want to know how smart I am, I will convince myself of that when I'm shaving in the morning. You are smart. Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Now, what I need is for somebody to tell me my baby's ugly if my baby is ugly. Yeah. Now, for the junior folks, listen, you can't just go, your baby's ugly, right? You can't say, you shouldn't say, I don't think, if you say to me, hey, Major, I disagree, we have a problem here. We have a little testosterone estrogen problem here. If I'm the boss, I've got to prove you wrong 9 times out of 7 because you've challenged me. So I'm not trying to junior folks in the room, I'm not trying to stand up in front of a beer truck to get run over. No, you should go into a meeting thinking to yourself, I'm never going to leave a meeting if I have a feeling in the pit of my stomach that something's not right. But have the humility to also understand that maybe you're not right. A way to get past that impasse, for me anyway, has been to ask questions. Hey, sir, if you hadn't said that, I was thinking this. Can you educate me? I've got my counter idea on the table. I've asked for the education, and now my boss isn't challenged. They can say, hey, Pete, you're right, or no, here's why that's not right. What I need, though, is for you to speak up. Again, if you think about it, no matter how inexperienced you might be, everybody in this room has had the responsibility to make decisions. When have you felt the most comfortable with your decision? When you've been by yourself, thinking it through by yourself, and then making a pronouncement? Or when you've had a chance to stand in front of your peers or a small group or whatever they are and lay it out and have people ask you questions about it to kind of hone your idea into a better place? It's true whether you're the lowest person on the rung or the top person. Everybody needs their subordinates helping, thinking their way through this. The very first time I went to the White House as vice chairman, I was the acting chairman at the National Security Council meeting. And I had promised myself as a lieutenant in Vietnam that if I ever got to be in D.C. and be a general, I wasn't going to keep my mouth shut. So I'm sitting there in the White House. I'm at the table, President, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Watash. And the discussion has nothing to do with the U.S. military. But I'm saying to myself, this doesn't sound right. So I say to the president, Mr. President, this is a little bit out of my lane, and that's as far as I got. And he said, Pete, as long as you are in this room, nothing is out of your lane. Aye, sir. 2 days later, still acting chairman. I go back again. Being a Marine, I'm a little bit of a slow learner. So I'm sitting there in the situation room again, and the discussion's going on. And again, it's got nothing to do with U.S. military, but I'm saying, Joe Sixpack down at the 7-Eleven isn't going to get this. So I kind of swallow because I'm still a new guy and I don't want to be a spring butt. But I say, Mr. President, this is a little bit out of my lane, and he stops me again. And he says, Pete, didn't I tell you 2 days ago that as long as you're in this room, nothing is out of your lane? And I said, Mr. President, you did tell me that, and you will not have to tell me that again. What did the senior person in the room say? In this case, the president, but for all of us who have subordinates, the senior person in that room said, I need people's brains engaged. And even though you, and you are your duty experts, I need the rest of you thinking it through. And what he told me, without having to say it, was, hey, you're wearing a uniform, you're my chairman, you're my vice chairman, but I need everybody else in this room in suits and dresses to be asking you questions to satisfy their questions, which will help me as president make my decisions. Very powerful place for, in this case, the president, but any senior leader to get his subordinates to be. Making decisions and encouraging the decisions and understanding that sometimes you're not going to be right. I'm not saying just for junior folks. I used that technique when I was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I would say to the president on occasion, Mr. President, if you hadn't said it that way, I was thinking this. Can you educate me? Now, truth in advertising. After almost 40 years, I was ready for him to say, oh my God, Pete, brilliant. I got the education I asked for just enough times to make me really happy that I hadn't put it on the table as right? A little humility goes a long way, no matter how old, how young you are. Next, I call it setting your moral compass. You can call it whatever you want. Just do it. For me, again, back to Vietnam, I remembered at the basic school of Quantico, Virginia, where all Marine officers go before they go into their occupational specialty. You spend 6 months at Quantico. And during one of those classes at Quantico, I remember a leadership class about troops who did things they shouldn't do in combat, atrocities, cutting off ears of the enemy as souvenirs and stuff like that. And I remember thinking to myself, what? I'll never, ever let anybody in my command do anything illegal or immoral. Not gonna happen. 30 July 1968, I've been in country like 6-7 months. We're on patrol outside of Da Nang, and a sniper shoots from a local village and hits my machine gun squad leader, a Lance Corporal named Guido Ferranaro, right in the chest. Guido died almost instantly right there. I was infuriated. I called in an artillery strike on the village. My platoon sergeant, who's on his second tour, but it was an E5 sergeant second tour, he's probably like 20 years old. Again, I'm a second lieutenant, 22 years old. Didn't say anything to me, but I could tell by the way he was looking at me that what I was doing was wrong. I should have known, but when I saw his face, I knew I was wrong. So I did what I should have done. And oh no, by the way, thank God for the folks in the room who are not experts in artillery fire. It takes a little while from the time you ask for artillery until the artillery battery figures out where you are, where the enemy is, how to put the right elevation and stuff on the guns so the rounds land where they should. During that time is when this look from the platoon sergeant got my attention. So we were able to, fortunately, call out the strike and do what we should have done, which was sweep through the village on foot. And go figure, all we found were women and children. I would not be standing in front of you today had I done what I almost did. It stunned me. When we got back from the patrol, I apologized to my platoon, and I promised them that I would never, ever let that happen again if I was able to prevent it. Literally, every day since 30 July 1968, to include this morning, while shaving, I think to myself, what might challenge me morally today? 99.99999% of the time, nothing challenges me morally today. And oh, by the way, when it does, it's something I hadn't thought about. That's not the point. The point is to have yourself trained to think about who you are. When you get an order, when something happens, to think through, if I do this, can I live with myself tomorrow? Now, for me, it was a life and death situation. It's not always life and death, and certainly most of the time it's not. What happens is that when you are least prepared emotionally to deal with it, the challenge to your moral compass comes. But it comes disguised. Folks don't go to work, most folks don't go to work and say, I think I'll do something immoral today. No, what happens is somebody rolls a sweat grenade in the room. The enemy does something, or a competing company does something, or the stock market does something, or the oil market does something. Something happens in your environment where pants are on fire, and you got to get something done, and you're rushing to get it, whatever it is, fixed, and that's when you're subject to do things you wouldn't normally do. That's when the 2 nanoseconds it takes to think through, is this me, is really important. And that's when, as a senior, having told your subordinates, I plan on leading this organization in a moral way, and I expect you to act the same way, and I need you to flag me if you think I'm off course. And again, for the juniors to have the same thing in their head. Just having that set. There's a reason why it makes a whole lot more sense to decide when you walk into the bar whether or not you're going to go home with somebody in your arm than it does at 2 o'clock in the morning after you've been drinking all night. All right? Moral challenge, least prepared emotionally to deal with it. Really, really important. Okay? Again, from the junior point, you don't want to say to your boss, I think that's immoral. You know, you talk about telling truth to power. Great, fine, General. Yeah, you pontificate about telling truth to power. Telling truth to power only works if power listens. You don't get power to listen by challenging them either in, I think you're wrong, or I think that's immoral. No. We talked about how to put questions on the table, but the same thing with the moral thing. You can say to your boss, we can do it that way. The best I can think it through to the end, this would be the outcome. Is that what you want? Let me decide I'm stupid. Don't tell me I'm stupid. Okay? If you're the junior person in the room. And if you're the senior person, have you set out clear markers? And on the rare occasion, morally, and the more frequent occasion when they question something you put on the table, have you praised them? Even if you don't agree with them. I'm perfectly fine putting my idea on the table and having the boss, having the CEO at the head of the table now, if I'm a director on his company. I'm going to put my ideas on the table. Take them or leave them. I'm going to get my ideas on the table. That's what juniors have the responsibility to do. And the seniors have the responsibility to encourage all that. 2 last things. 1, somebody once said to me, Pete, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. And if you do not have integrity, nothing else matters. And I don't care if you're the juniorest person in the room, juniorist, that's a new word, by the way, or the most senior person in the room. That's pretty much all any of us needs to know about integrity. Last, when you have leadership responsibility, take care of the people in your charge. It's a sacred privilege and obligation, especially in the military. When you're a junior leader, how do you take care of the people in your charge? One thing I recommend is just spend 5 minutes a day talking to one of your subordinates about them, not about the job, not about anything that's going on officially. Just who are they? What's their family like? What are their aspirations in life? Just talk to them like the human beings they are. Over time, they'll start telling you, maybe they'll tell you some of their problems. Quite honestly, most of the time, you can't do much about personal problems other than commiserate, but that's worth something. But over time, a caring leader won't get it right all the time, but they will try to get it right all the time, and your subordinates will know that. If you go around and you talk to them daily, see how they're doing, if you fight for their promotions and their pay raises, that all over time. This is not something where, you decide you're going to be a caring leader today, and a month from now, everybody in the organization says, oh, what a great caring leader he is. No, it takes years to keep doing it consistently. But you can start out, and about 6 months into it, people are going to know that, and a couple of years into it, that's going to be your reputation. And then an amazing thing happens. If you are a caring leader, your subordinates will take your guidance and they'll start executing it. And I don't care what walk of life you're in, there's friction in everything we try to do as human beings. As soon as we start doing whatever the job is, the friction is going to hit. And in an organization that's led by caring leaders, what happens is the subordinates will take personal, professional risk. They will decide for themselves, okay, Pete said do this, this is the end state he wants, the way he said to do it's not going to work, I'm going to change it on the fly because I know this is where he wants me to be. If they think that Pete's in it for his next promotion, you know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to do exactly what I told them to do. And because none of us are smart enough to see all the pitfalls that are out there, whatever it is going to fail. And they're going to giggle behind our back when we get carted off and a new boss comes in. Now, the reason to take care of your folks is because that's what good leaders do. But the result of doing what good leaders should do for their subordinates, the result is an organization that's going to perform much higher than any of us have any right to believe we could lead others to accomplish. It's incredible. I'll take credit for not many things. I will take credit for being a caring leader. I did not always get it right. But I know my subordinates thought I was trying, and I know because of that they made me look a whole lot better than I deserve to look. Routinely, they made me look better. Okay, let me stop talking at you. We got about 15 minutes. The microphones are here, if you would please. As Admiral Daly said, please come on up to the microphone. Just tell us who you are and then ask your question. And nothing's out of bounds, and we'll see where it goes.
I am retired Commander Bob Tiernan. I'm here with my father, Admiral Bob Tiernan, and that is not me. Okay? Break the ice. Iran is missing a general. What do you think about that?
I wish they were missing him sooner. Listen, this guy deserves to be dead. I wish on my watch we were able to get him. I think it's unfortunate that somehow the dialogue has gone to, was he on the precipice of doing something bad tomorrow? What were the 3 next things he was going to do? How about the 20 years of hundreds of thousands of dead people. That's good enough for me. He's dead. He should be dead.
So, Ron
I'm
Young,
sorry, did that answer your question, sir?
Ron Young, San Francisco, imagining your briefing every morning of the president, right now, what is the most dangerous place in the world?
There are two existential threats right now. One is nuclear weapons, and they were used 70 plus years ago, and thank God have not been used again. And the other is cyber weapons, and they're being used thousands of times every single day. So cyber weapons are my current, most closest to the sled, existential threat to the country. Because think about San Francisco and having electricity turned off in San Francisco for a month. We can do that tomorrow. Others can do that to us. What's happened in cyber so far is that, just like nuclear weapons, we have kind of like mutually assured destruction. The countries that have the capacity to turn off the lights in San Francisco for a month have things that can be held at risk. The problem coming is that as computers get smaller and smaller and more powerful, soon non-state entities will be able to do this. And when they do, we will not be able to attribute it to somebody, and that's why it becomes an existential threat, because literally, if you turn off the power for a month, the way we live is going to be turned on its head. Okay. Following behind that is not as an existential threat, but as a real possibility of miscalculation is our relationships with China. The problem with the Chinese, and after I retired, I went over there about every 6 months to meet with my counterparts. What happens is they take people who used to be somebody and have them go meet with other people who used to be somebody, so that you can have a dialogue. Because if I go in uniform to China and I say to my counterpart in a uniform, we don't like what you're doing, he has to save face. But if I go over there now and say to him, hey, we don't like what you're doing in cyber, and he says, well, we don't like what you're doing to us in Taiwan, you can have that dialogue and then report back to your own countries about what's going on. In that dialogue, I did that for about 3 years. In that dialogue, I asked one of my interlocutors, I said, hey, help me understand. Do you or do you not believe that taking other people's intellectual property is wrong? And basically the answer was, you leave your front door unlocked, your problem. So culturally, we're coming at this from two different things. We think intellectual property theft is bad. They think, yeehaw, just gave us a step up. And where they get into competition is amongst themselves on who's going to add or subtract from that to make it a Chinese product that they can use. So you have that mismatch. You also now have, I think, what arguably the Chinese leadership looking to reassert Chinese dominance, not just living with the rest of the world, but dominance.
Especially in the South China Sea.
In the South China Sea. So they're really happy watching us mess around with North Korea, because while we're looking at North Korea up here, they're building islands down here in the South China Sea. Okay, so China is militarily the closest problem to us. I'm not pessimistic. I'm not optimistic. I hope I'm realistic that there's still an opportunity to fix this. I think some of the economic dialogue we have going on is good. The question is, in their mind, are the economics of getting the other, let's say they've got, out of 1.3 billion, let's say for the sake of argument, they have 700 to 800 million Chinese living well now. That still leaves them 500 to 600 million Chinese, twice the size of our country, living in the Stone Ages. So what's more important to them? Having the kind of economic opportunities that cooperation with the United States provides them, or would they rather have Chinese dominance globally and figure out their citizens later on? One last thing on that, and I'll stop. The Chinese are not without problems. One, you've seen what just the tariff war has done to their economy. Two, because of their one-child policy, they now have a declining population. and they've got one child taking care of two parents and four grandparents over time, and a declining population. To sustain a population, you have to have 2.1 births per couple. They're down to about one. They were down to one point something. That's not sustainable. So they have a bathtub of youngsters who don't exist, and then inside that bathtub, a terrible imbalance of men versus women, because they kill like 300 million girl babies to stay inside the one-child policy, and they want to have one male child in the family. So now you get all these men with raging hormones and no place to say hi.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chuck Williams. I'm a proud Navy corpsman during the Korean era, 1951 to 55.
Hurrah, Doc.
I went in when I was 7 years old. But anyway, I had the pleasure of meeting General Pete in Las Vegas a few years ago, and it was at a Fisher House charity event. And I was so impressed with him as a man that I live in Hawaii, so I flew up here just to be here this evening with him. And the question I have is, what is the most gratifying assignment that you had, whether it's in the beginning of your career, the middle of your career, or the end of the career? Because certainly you made it to the top of the mountain, obviously. And that you were able to accomplish things that you didn't think you could do, and using the precepts that you discussed with us tonight, that you were able to be successful at this and said, wow, I actually did it.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
Clearly, the opportunity to be chairman and have the opportunity to influence policy and the like at that level would be the most influential thing I did external to myself. But I'd rather answer the question, if you let me, on what was the most influential on me, because that is, to me, much more important than talking about 4 stars. Being a rifle platoon leader in Vietnam changed my life completely. Hue City, 158 Marines in my company, 155 killed or wounded. I was my platoon's 3rd platoon commander as many weeks, and I did not receive a scratch in that battle. There were 2 other times in Vietnam where I should have been killed. One was when I was walking, checking the fence line of an installation we were protecting, and there was concertina wire over here and concertina wire over here, and this was all around this building. So I'm in this 10 meters between the 2 sets of wires, just wandering back and forth, making notes about, because I was about to take over the responsibility for security for a week. And I was in there about 10, 15 minutes when the guy I was relieving comes running out and says, "Pete, freeze, you're in a minefield." And when I looked down, next to my foot was there's 3 prongs of a bouncing Betty mine. You know, like you step on them, they pop up and blow you away. I had been in there aimlessly wandering for 10, 15 minutes, checking the wire back and forth, making notes. And the 3rd time was on the 18th of August of '68, when my platoon was the rear in the company. We were on patrol. The front elements came under fire. My platoon was ordered to come up and sweep through the objective as a reserve. And to do that, I went up to see my company commander, and we were looking at the objective. He was describing what he wanted me to do, and we were kneeling down. And as we all stood up, the acting company gunner, a staff sergeant named Freddie Williams, stepped across in front of me at the exact moment we stood up, and the sniper pulled the trigger. And instead of hitting me in the square in the chest, it hit him right in the side as he stepped across in front of me. He died almost instantly. Nothing happened to me. Okay. So I know at least of those events. Add to that, great young Americans, Lance Corporal Guido Farinaro, Corporal Chubby Hale, PFC Whitey Travers, Corporal Mike Witt, Staff Sergeant Freddie Williams, Lance Corporal Dan Miller, Lance Corporal Little Joe Arnold. All died in combat following Second Lieutenant Pace's orders. They died, I survived. When I came back from Vietnam, it was individual replacement at the time, so we spent a week on Okinawa decompressing before we came home, went to church every day, and trying to figure out why I had survived when they had not. And like all of us who survived, feeling guilty. Not guilty like, oh my God, just guilty. And the deal I came up with the good Lord was, the best I could figure out was, if those things happen, there must be something I'm supposed to do. There's a reason I survived. And the best I could come up with in my prayers was, the answer I thought I got was, stay on active duty. So I stayed on active duty. And during the times in 1970s when there were riots in the barracks and Marine officers were armed with live ammunition to protect themselves from their own troops, all during that terrible time in our Marine Corps, and all the other times, wouldn't matter what was going on, I would say to myself, you made this deal, you're on the track you're supposed to be on. And when I say grow where you're planted, I allowed myself to complain when I was unhappy for exactly one day, and then I said to myself, you made a deal, you're on the track you're supposed to be on, hang in there, okay? The deal I made was, I'll stay on active duty until I'm no longer needed, and I'll know I'm no longer needed when I don't get promoted. So that part worked out okay. But literally, still on my desk at home is the first Marine I lost in combat. It's been on my desk since Vietnam. Lance Corporal Guido Farinero. It was on my desk when I was vice chairman and chairman. It's on there now. It'll be on there when I die. When I would go to testify in front of Congress. If you've ever seen people testify, they go with 3-ring binders and they have people handing them notes. I went, no binders, because I figured if I didn't know it well enough to talk, I shouldn't talk. And I would tell my guys, 2 people go with me. One sits over there, and one sits over here. Anybody hands me a note gets killed. Okay. And then I would sit down, and all I'd have would be a pad of paper in front of me, and I would write, Lance Corporal Guido Farinero. And when the congressman or the senator would start going, nyeh, 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 or when they would come and go and you get asked the exact same question 5 times because the guys weren't there when they got asked the previous 4 times, I would tell myself, your job is to answer the question. Their job is to ask them. Your job is, and I read, if I started going, I just read Guido's name and say, you owe it to him and the others. So you asked me what part of my life was most whatever, but for me, the most substantive, influential, life-changing thing for me was being a rifle platoon leader in combat. And although I wouldn't wish that on anybody, if you're going to be in this business, having had the opportunity as a second lieutenant, that changed my outlook on everything about how to lead and the things that were important and when to speak up. Everything about my life changed because of that. That would be the most influential thing. Okay. We're gonna take these 2 questions and then we're gonna let people go home because we promised. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Can everybody hear me? I'm Kai Yamamoto from CSU Maritime Academy. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous because I used to read about
Me too. That's okay. I'll come down there with you. Give me a hand. No, hold hands. Yeah.
Oh, there's so much command present in this room. Just.
We're good.
But my question.
Don't worry about those captains back there, the commanders who have notebook out. No, don't worry about them.
My question to you, sir, is because I've been involved in leadership for quite a bit of my life. So my question is sort of a bit multi-pronged, just sort of because I'm kind of on a lower part of leadership. I really want to jump to a higher one. That's my goal for the coming year. So a bit multi-pronged is, what advice do you give to someone like me who's going to be kind of going into a whole new environment leadership? And also, how do I be an effective leader in sort of just now, especially now, ever-shifting kind of culture going on right now? So just how do I effectively lead while dealing with, because every minute there's always something new going on. Like it's no longer just as simple as it used to be.
Okay, so number 1, just the fact that you're worried about that is great. If you ever ask a person, are you a good leader? and they say yes, they're not. Really, I don't care. Anybody who thinks you're a good leader doesn't deserve to be leading. You should feel good that you have the responsibility, and you should feel good about your talents, but you should also, no matter what rank you are, feel like you don't have any God-given right to be in that position. You're lucky to have it, and you've got to work hard every day to be a good leader and earn it again, every single day, number one. Number two, trust your instincts. You're going to be right, call it 8 times out of 10. Maybe it's 7, maybe it's 9, but just following your instincts. You have more experience than you think you have right now. Trust your instincts when you're making decisions. Now, sometimes you don't know exactly what to do. If you have the responsibility and you're not sure, you know it's your responsibility, you're just not sure what am I supposed to do? Take yourself out of your body and kind of look down on yourself and say, okay, if I'm your subordinate, if you were me, what would you expect you to do? Your peers, if you were one of your peers, what would you expect you to do? If you were your boss, what would you expect you to do? Okay? And look at it from all those vantage points. And then don't do anything anybody expects you to do. Having looked at it from that, do the thing with which you are personally most comfortable. When you wake up tomorrow morning, knowing you made this decision today, no matter what happens because of it, you know that that's the best decision for you. Now, if, rarely, but sometimes, when an individual makes leadership decisions repeatedly, and the organization tells that person that they are wrong repeatedly, they're in the wrong organization. I mean, it sounds funny, but I don't mean it to be. If you are working hard, thinking things through, coming to what feels good in your stomach and what you believe is the correct thing to do, and you make that decision, and something goes off the rails, okay, fine. But if it's always going off the rails, or people always telling you, that's not the way the merchant marine operates. You shouldn't be there. You're not the right guy. You should run away as fast as you can, okay? And then don't be afraid to admit your mistakes. Not, oh my God, I blew that one. No, it's, hey, you got 6 guys who are working for you, right? And you get them together and say, I can't use the F word here, but I F that thing up. Just be a human being about it and say, I learned from it. But don't be afraid to admit you're wrong. What does that do for your subordinates, by the way? It brings them closer to you, because when you admit to being wrong, it allows them to admit to being wrong. If you come across as I'm perfect all the time, if they're not perfect all the time, they believe they can't even approach you on this. So there's lots and lots of reasons to do this, okay? But trust your instincts, be truthful with your subordinates, learn from your mistakes, you'll be fine.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Hi, Gunny.
Evening, sir. Gunner Charles Lane, 1st Marine Division. As a staff NCO, it is my job to advise and enforce and lead my Marines in any situation that presents itself. We have a new generation of citizens and military personnel that question our leaders, as they did during Vietnam and countless times in our history. What would you say would be the key to ensuring our junior Marine men, women, and civilians have a clear message and buy-in to see through the noise and deter our mission from success?
Okay, I'm going to try this answer, and if I've misunderstood the question, come back at me, okay? Don't let me off the hook. It is absolutely understandable and correct that leaders at every level understand what's going on and what the threats are to the organization. So let's just use our Marine Corps, okay? It is absolutely fine for you, Gunny, to know that the commandant is fighting for dollars and cents, is fighting for the size of the Marine Corps, is fighting for all the things that the commandant gets paid to do in Washington, D.C., okay? But any of your leadership time, any of your brain power that you spend worrying about that is just wasted. And that's true at every level, every level. So my guidance, number one, would be to subordinates and to myself is stay in your lane. Stay in your bandwidth, okay? What's your job right now, Gunny?
G6.
Okay, so you have got X number of Marines below you and a boss, right? So in your responsibilities, whoever you are, but in your case you, 2 levels of leadership down and 2 levels of leadership up. That's your 5 lanes, your bandwidth, okay? Should you know what's going on over here? Yeah. Should you worry about it? No. Let the people whose job it is to worry about that, worry about it. You take care of yourself and your Marines 2 levels down and 2 up, and you're good. And then you'll get promoted. And now you still got 2 levels down, 2 levels up, to just move to the right. If you will do that, and if you will convince your youngsters to do that, first of all, you're going to be happier because you're going to be in this bandwidth that you can actually affect. Okay? If I'm a platoon leader, I can impact my company commander and my battalion commander, and I can impact my squad leaders and my fire team leaders. Right? I become a captain, etc. Okay, you see where I'm going with this thing. But that to me is critical to, number one, doing your job, and number two, then being happy in your work. Now, put your Commandant of Marine Corps hat on. Okay, the Commandant of Marine Corps goes around Washington D.C. in the uniform you're wearing with a couple of stars on it, and everybody in D.C. believes when the Commandant says my Marines can do something, they are going to do it. No questions asked. It's going to happen. Why? Because Marines have done that for 240 some odd years. Okay? The Commandant, who he is writing blank checks that you are cashing for him. We've talked many times as a Corps historically that the nation doesn't need a Marine Corps, it wants one. And it wants one because we deliver. It doesn't deliver because the Commandant says, I can do this. It delivers because the Commandant says, I can do it, and you do it. Okay? And that's the beauty of why making sure your Marines understand. Should you be aware of the social stuff? Yeah. Should you be aware of everything? Sure, be aware. But comes down to it. G6, communications. How is this communications platoon going to be the best communications platoon on the planet? So when the Commandant writes a blank check and we end up on a ship someplace, going someplace, when we get there, we do it the way Marines have always done it. That's how we should be leading our guys, I believe, in answer to the question I thought you asked. Now, if you didn't ask that question, have at me.
No, sir, you answered it perfectly.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
On behalf of the Naval Institute, we want to thank our audience for coming out on a rainy night in San Francisco. And we also owe deep thanks and appreciation to General Pace for his very impressive presentation. Let's give him one big hand. Thank you, everybody.